Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone is doing well. Today I have 4 Reddit stories for you. All credit goes to the original posters of these stories, and I will put the links in my description box. If I pronounce anything wrong, I do apologize. Kurt. I have so many stories, I'm not sure where to begin. Let's go with Kurt Cobain. I was 15 when I began experimenting with the Ouija board. I didn't really know anything about the dark side of it, as my grandmother played it with me when I was very young. The board my Jima chose to play with me was supposedly my great-grandmother's, her mother's. I was told later my great-grandmother was very intrigued by the supernatural. Anyway, the board had significance to me due to this, and I held it to the highest regard, as it was my only relic from my ancestry. It began innocent enough and always played with a friend. We'd joke and play, asking all the mundane questions. After about 20 seconds answered correctly with no way of the other person's playing, I was hooked. I had a magnetic connection to the board. To be honest, never felt a connection like that since, actually. Soon I found myself drawn to playing it constantly. Once out of school, I wanted to play it. I realized none of my friends were as interested as I was in the thing. So yes, despite the warnings, I played by myself. This would be the beginning of my curse. I do believe. I would play hooky so I could play an entire school day. I couldn't put the planchette down. I spoke to Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, several past classmates, and the most prominent, Kurt Cobain. He died while my obsession was spawning, so naturally being a fan. I couldn't wait to reach him. I remember trying a few times before it felt authentic, but eventually it was, and no one will ever convince me otherwise. He told me to get the word out about his murder. He told me to somehow get his wife investigated. He was pleading. I would get lost in a trance-like state and realize 4 to 5 hours would go by without me ever stopping. He told me some pretty amazing stuff that I can't really remember today, but know they were profound enough for me to tell everyone, and I do mean everyone. He told me Courtney killed him and staged his death. I'd go on about what a nasty skank she was and that she needed to be arrested. I still to this day do not understand how she got away from it all. It really doesn't make sense. This actually forced me to realize a few things quite early in life. I had a couple people that said they believed me, but no one did. My parents didn't, and it really drove me nuts. I started doing some crazy teenage angst things and morbidly wore a picture of him safety pinned to my clothes daily. Living in my hometown where I went to school, I never knew my actions as a 15-year-old would still be brought up today. But whatever. Point is, things were happening. In the rare event I did want to sleep, I couldn't. I must have went a month without sleep after his death. I saw things I still cannot explain. It wasn't him that was doing these odd things, though. I could tell. It was something far more sinister. Things would fly off the walls, candles would go out, brand new CDs would skip. I sound so old rating this. I would hear things, see figures standing over me when I would try to sleep. It was pretty traumatic, to say the least. Now, Kurt would always have a sunny disposition. The other spirits I spoke to didn't. I think I opened up a whole dimension of demonic beings once I began playing. My obsession lasted about 1.5 years, all the while the board being my main focus. I remember speaking to Kurt one night before my parents got home about something new in the media about his case. Not sure what it was, but it was prevalent. I was downstairs and saw the same picture of Kurt I always safety pinned on a TV scrolling up. My mom and dad saw it. My dad still doesn't talk about it, but my mother still gets freaked out every time she hears his name. Here's the kicker. This TV was not on and was unplugged. I just calmly walked by it and my mom stopped me, screamed my name and asked if I saw it. I replied yes, and think it just was a common at this point. I didn't give it a second glance until she startled me by pointing it out. I have several more chilling stories, but this is installed in my mind. Kurt never rested about getting his story to be heard and told me unless he left some evidence behind, everyone was just going to close him away. Once dead and gone. I reminded and reassured him this would never happen. I would always seek the truth and continue to make waves and let the proper authorities know so Courtney could face justice. I'm happy to say that over 20 years later, there is evidence of Courtney's intent. I am not entirely sure of the investigation status currently, but know some details recently have been brought to light. Bye for now. Something from my school will haunt me to this day. I was laying on my bed texting with my old schoolmate, talking about our old school days and how fun it was. As we're talking, my friend mentioned that our old school building was shut down because it was too small and couldn't fit all of the students. So the city decided to rebuild it. So now the school is waiting to be rebuilt, hence why it's empty. A couple of days later, as I was walking home from work late in the evening, I walked past my old school, and I decided to check the place out one more time for good time's sake. The school looked like any other in the area, 3 stories high and made up of bricks, except this school had many large windows. As I was walking through the courtyard, my nostalgia hit me pretty hard. I saw the bench that me and my friends used as a ledge to skate on, and the ping pong table we used to play on, and all the other things we used to pass time during recess. As I continued walking through the courtyard, something caught my eye. The school cafeteria window was left open. When I went to take a closer look, I noticed that the window's wooden frame where the lock was had something that looked like scratch marks. In my head, I thought that it might have been a weird way for looters or teenagers to break in. As I was looking around, the curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to go on a treasure hunt. As I climbed through the cafeteria window and looked around the cafeteria, it felt really eerie. But that's expected for an abandoned building. The cafeteria looked exactly the same when I attended that school. The big windows pointing out to the courtyard and the decorations filling the white cafeteria walls. It was really dark in there, so I took out my phone and put the flashlight on. I walked through the cafeteria to the hallway where all of the lockers were, and I tried to look for my old locker. When I finally found my locker, I tried to open the lock, but to my surprise it didn't open, and suddenly a loud bang came from the second floor. As I heard the loud bang in my head, I thought about getting the fuck out of there as quickly as possible. I've read a lot of horror during my free time, and I always know that the ones who investigate get killed first. But I know horror stories are not real, so I decided to investigate. As I walked up the stairs to the second floor, a sudden reek of shit hit my nostrils and I almost puked. When I reached the second floor and looked towards the hallway to my right, where the stink came from, I went and investigated the source of the smell. As I reached the end of the long hallway, it was clear that the smell came from the classroom to my left. I reached my hand for the handle and opened the door. Then I pointed my flashlight to the classroom, and I noticed that a bookshelf across the room had fallen over. And I thought to myself, this couldn't have fallen over on its own. And that's when I saw something in the corner of my eye. Am I crazy? Is what I thought to myself before checking again. There it was, hanging in the upper corner of the classroom. It was tall, pale, and zombie-like, with its eyes glowing white and claws the size of my head, and it was staring at me emotionless. When suddenly it put itself down and I could clearly see how long its arms were. The monster started to run towards me, screaming as loud as a siren, and its arms were opened widely so it could catch me. I closed the door as quickly as possible and started running towards the stairs as the monster was banging on the door. I knew I couldn't make it in time for the stairs, so I had to hide. As I was frantically looking for a place to hide, the only place that I could hide in was an open locker. When I was inside the locker, I could hear the door break down. Then I saw the monster run past my locker and to the other end of the long hallway. As time went, I could hear the creature breaking into other classrooms just to look for me. Then I heard the creature run to the 3rd floor. I took my chance to run for the stairs. While I was making my way down the stairs, I heard quick steps coming down from the 3rd floor. Then I started to run towards the cafeteria, and I headed for the open window that led to the courtyard. I decided to do a stupid thing and looked back, and I could see it running from the entrance of the cafeteria towards me, and I just barely made it through the window. I was still running because I didn't know if it was going to chase me outside, but I didn't hear any footsteps. Then I looked back at the school. I could see it watching me with a smile from the window. This happened 4 years ago. To this day, when I walk past the school, I swear I can still see it staring at me through the windows with a smile. The creep from a few years ago. Hey Reddit, this is my first post here. I'm a female, 29 years old. This story goes back to when I was 24. I have to say that this was a creepy situation, but it has definitely stuck with me over the years. This might not be a traditional post, especially compared to others that I've read, but still one that I feel like telling. So I was 24 years old at the time. I had gone out to a bar with some of my friends from work. I had just gone out of a relationship with this guy, and I was looking to unwind a bit. This came in the form of many beers and many shots. I'm no alcoholic, but thus one night would have probably made people think otherwise. Me and a few of my friends were dancing and honestly acting like drunk idiots. One of my friends even pulled her shirt up, which of course gathered the attention of nearby bargoers. I know how dumb this was, but we were drunk and having fun. This one guy came over and started dancing near us. He wasn't bad looking and seemed to just be having a good time like the rest of us. I danced with him for a couple of songs, then gave him a hug before telling him that I was going to go back with my friends. Well, this guy didn't seem to take that as an option. He grabbed me by my wrist and pulled me back towards him. I pulled back again and tried leaving, but he wouldn't let me go. I was scared half to death. I kept trying to pull away, but he just changed personality on me entirely. A guy came from behind me, put his hand on my waist, and then grabbed my arm. I went into full panic mode. Now remember, I was drunk. I grabbed my pepper spray from my keychain and turned around and sprayed him in the face. He immediately grabbed his face, and my friend, who is a Marine Corps veteran, shoved her heel right up into his groin. He hit the floor like a ton of bricks. The guy in front of me left whenever the bouncer came over to defuse the situation. The guy that I sprayed got kicked out of the bar. We left not long after. The guy I sprayed was with some of his friends by his car. No sign of the other dude. He was still recovered from the altercation. My friend went over and yelled at him for trying that with me. The two started screaming at each other, and he said all he was trying to do was get me away from the other guy. The who situation still sent me on high alert. I was still creeped from the whole situation, but he seemed fairly sincere. I agreed to give him the benefit of the doubt. We've been married for a year now. My daughter's friend, Thelma. Imaginary friends. We've all had them. Oh, sure, we all get the occasional creepypasta about them, but at worst, they're just a symptom of a treatable mental illness. They're never actually real, and yet, right now, I'm not so sure. I don't know if it was my daughter's imaginary friend that did this to her, but what happened to my daughter only 2 weeks ago, no less, was a horrific tragedy, and I don't think the imaginary friend she had before that was completely non-compliant in it. Okay, let's start at the beginning. I used to be a normal mom. My name is Ella, and my daughter Susan is 5, and now she'll always be 5 forever. Okay, off topic there. Susan used to go to kindergarten outside town. We live in Blackthorn, Ohio. Her teacher, Miss Adina, actually lived 2 doors down from us, and she's been nothing but an angel to me and Susan, especially during this awful time. I honestly don't know what I would do without the wonderful woman. But it was during her kindergarten that this fiasco started. I came to pick her up, and she told me she'd made a new friend at school. Oh, really? I asked. And what's their name? Thelma, she said cheerfully. She's invisible and lives in a giant playground world full of stars she created. At this point, I, of course, figured Thelma was imaginary. She sounds wonderful, I said. She is, said Susan. Miss Adina told me to stay back and clean the toy corner during break time. At first I thought it would be boring, but then Thelma showed up and magically cleaned it, and we spent the rest of break time playing together. Susan always had such imagination, and she was such a big talker. On the car ride home, Susan described her new friend's appearance. She's black all over, and her clothes and hair are too, and she's got little white dots sparkling all over herself, and she says she's 7 years old. I thought it was just adorable at the time. That night, Susan came to me saying that Thelma would be staying at our house for a week, and she would be playing with her. Okay, I said again with an amused smile. The next day, Susan came home with another Thelma story. She opened up a way to her world during break time, and we played in there all day. She said she's gonna take me there forever. At this point, I grew mildly concerned. Susan, I said, Thelma is imaginary. You know that, right? Susan giggled. No, she's not, she said. She's sitting next to me in the car seat right now. And she pointed to the empty seat next to her. I was relieved to know that it wasn't anyone grooming Susan at school, but I was mildly concerned for her psyche at this point. But through mental gymnastics, I erased my worries. She's just pretending, I said to myself. Lots of kids have imaginary friends at this age. She'll get over it. She's not insane. You probably are. And maybe I was. I know that I'm probably insane now anyway. Susan came home from school the next day with a concerned look on her face. Thelma doesn't like you, she said in the car. She says you're boring and always telling me what to do, and she hates that. That night, there was more mental gymnastics on my part. Thelma isn't real, I repeated to myself over and over again. For the next few days, until the end of the week, it was normal. Susan coming home from school every day with a new story about what she and Thelma did together that day, until Sunday. On Sunday morning, Susan told me Thelma was going to take her to her world tonight. I didn't respond. I was an odd combination of scared, in denial, and angry at myself for being worried about this. Just an imaginary friend, just an imaginary friend, just an imaginary friend. On Monday morning, I woke up and couldn't find Susan anywhere. The police were called, but they didn't find her. And I was hating myself while at the same time trying to reassure myself that it wasn't Thelma who did this. And yet, just last week, the police found Susan's body. She'd been discovered up in a tree in the forest in our town, with 7 different stab wounds and a terrified expression on her face. And now I don't know whether it really was someone grooming her, whether someone else was in on the act, or whether it was something else. If anyone here knows anything about what might have been the deal with Thelma, please tell me. I need to know, and I need to know now. Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.